like, you know, I can drive better alignment. So just think about that, because as we go through today, as we talk about like how can you get to yes sooner, having some kind of situation in your mind, whether it's something that's in the future, current, something in the past, make up something in your mind if you can't think of anything, will help you get more out of today's session. Not only when I share some tips, but also when you go into your networking events, conversations. I think that's like a really nice space for you to like share your challenges and get feedback, and just like also realize like, oh, you're going through the same thing. Like I've done it. Here's how I solved it. Or like, I don't know how to solve it, but at least we're like in it together. So just thinking about like, what's the problem that you're facing right now around stakeholder buy-in management.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we're 6 minutes past the hour, so let's get started. My name is Paula Young. I'm a product lead at RBC Ventures and a co-chapter lead for the Toronto chapter of Women in Product. And I want to welcome you all to three key questions to get a yes. So thank you for attending today, and thanks for choosing to spend this time with us, investing in learning actionable skills to help you up-level in your PM career. So today's event is a part of our new Women in Product Blender events. It's a new series to help connect our community year-round with targeted networking opportunities, as well as some bite-sized skill-building sessions. So after today's speed session with Shivani, we'll practice what we've learned in the Hop-in Blender, and then we'll rejoin here in the interactive group feedback session. And we'll also have some additional time after the group closes to do some more networking. So I'm thrilled to introduce you to Shivani Berry, the CEO and founder of Ascend's Leadership Program, an online learning leadership program for women. Shivani is a leadership coach and works with women from companies like Google, Facebook, Slack, Salesforce, Peloton, and she's been featured in Forbes. You can find her full bio and details on some of the cool stuff that Shivani has done below the window in the session. You can just simply scroll down. If you're interested in learning more about the Ascend program, you can click into the More area of the Hop-in menu on the left side. I'll hand it over to Shivani now, who will share some strategies to understand your audience and gain influence. And for our speed session, we'd love to hear some feedback and questions in our chat. From our one-on-one practice, we'll bring up the folks on screen to share your experiences and give Shivani a chance to give them feedback on some of their questions. So please welcome Shivani Berry.
Thank you so much, Polly. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here. Thanks to Women in Product for organizing this. Special shout out to Ariana for putting this together and Polly for helping to moderate today. So, before we dive in, and today is all about influence, and specifically like what are the 3 questions you should be thinking about to get to a yes? And before we dive into that, I have a question for you is like, put a yes in the chat if you have ever tried to convince your team to support your recommendation but failed. So put a yes in the chat if you've gone to your team, maybe the engineering, your product team, your manager, and it's been like, here's what I think we should do. And everyone's like, nah, shouldn't do it. Yes, yes, yes. All right. Okay, perfect. So this is like what we're gonna help you navigate through today. And we're gonna go through like one specific area that you can use to help you get to that yes. Where they don't turn you down. There's a lot more, and I'll show you a sneak peek into like what else you should be thinking about. But like at least today you'll walk away with like one specific strategy that you can apply to your own situation. And really like, I think I'm especially excited about today because Women in Product, so I used to be in product myself. And so I've benefited a lot from the Women in Product community. And now it's been a joy coming back and presenting at the conference and these other events. And especially because I've been firsthand, like I know the struggles that you face because like I face them too. And really, that's really what inspired me to start Ascend. When I was in product and then when I was moving up into management, I learned how to rally stakeholders, get my team invested in my ideas, empower my teams, advocate for myself, all by making a ton of mistakes. Some guys, probably just a lot of blowups. And so I wanted to create the leadership program I wish I had access to when I was making that transition into management. I remember that, when I was meeting with my team, I like vividly remember this. I was walking in to meet my team. So I was product lead at that time, and we were meeting to line up what product feature we were going to prioritize in the upcoming quarter. And I thought the recommendation, I was going to have like a search recommendation that we should build. I thought it was like really obvious why we should build it. I felt really confident going into the meeting, and that was going to be like an easy breezy conversation. And I remember sitting down and starting to share my recommendation, and I was like very quickly met with a lot of confused looks. some really annoyed faces. People ask me like a ton of questions, like why should we build this over this other feature, which is easier to build? How does this help our hit our goals? How does this impact the customer experience? Probably all questions that sound very familiar to all of you. And I remember walking out of the meeting feeling like I had failed, feeling like really stressed, feeling like just frustrated. That meeting did not go well. It totally blew up in my face. And my team felt super undervalued. They felt like I wasn't valuing their expertise or listening to them. But I was really confused because I had spent my time researching this idea. The data show this was a really great idea. So why had the meeting not gone well? As I reflected and got some feedback, I realized that I actually hadn't spent the time getting my team invested in my idea, walking them through my thought process. And once I learned the skills to get people invested, to be able to influence, my career changed. I felt so much more confident. I was able to move up faster in my career and not only impact my teams, but also our executives and our board of directors. And that's what led me to found Ascend. I want to help elevate more women into leadership. That's a big way we're going to see the change that we need to see in today's workplaces. But I learned that we currently learn how to lead and influence trial and error. We all know that we should get people invested in our ideas, that we should advocate for ourselves, that we should push back, but we don't for 3 big reasons. 1, we don't know how to get started. 2, we don't cover the time. Or 3, we're scared because practicing these skills at work is high stakes. If you make a mistake, it can hurt your reputation or worse. So that's why I want to create a Sense Leadership program to create a safe space for women like you to be able to push out of your comfort zone, build lasting habits around these critical leadership skills that you must have in order to move up, get to learn and make friends with a bunch of awesome women like you, and move up faster in your career. And we're doing it. For example, Diana, who is a marketing lead at SAP, joined the program right when she came off maternity leave at SP. And she just had her first child. She was able to use the program tools to help her drive better alignment in meetings. Her performance improved so much that she got promoted soon after the program. And I share that example with you to show how powerful knowing how to influence can be for your work. How much not only does it help your team be successful, but it will help you move up faster in your career. So today we're going to talk about how to influence, and specifically, what are these questions you should be asking to be able to drive to that yes. And then, as Polly said, we're going to go into networking sessions, breakout rooms. So, before we dive into that, I want to just share in the chat, like, why do you think some people ascend in their careers, but others don't? Why do you think some people move up in their careers, get promoted, but others don't? Share in the chat. Maybe it's your colleagues. You're like, why did that person just get promoted? Put that in the chat. Maybe it's luck, right place, right time, certain skills. They know the right people. Put that in chat. Like, why do you think some people are able to have that growth, but others don't?
I think maybe while we're waiting for that, like one thing that speaks to me, I think, is people who are very articulate and are able to convince people, talk about a very complex problem and narrow it down to something very simple. I think those are people who excel in their careers.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And what I found, and really if we look at confidence is a big piece of that. Thanks for sharing that, Kendall. And really what I found is when we look at the best leaders, they all know how to influence. They all are able to rally stakeholders. They're able to get people to follow along with them, especially when you're a PM. And that's why I'm especially excited for this conversation, is because as a product manager, you have no formal authority, right? Like, your only ability to get things done is to get other people bought in and be like, yeah, we should do this. It's a similar, and then when you move up into management, which I imagine is for most of you, the goal is, if you think about it, a manager doesn't actually do the work either. It's all about getting their team bought in. It's similar to a conductor. The conductor doesn't actually play the music. She guides the other musicians to play beautiful music. And so if you want to be moved to the top, if you want your engineers to look to you for decision-making, or the CTO or the CPO or your customers, then you have to know how to influence. You have to know how to get people bought into your ideas, how to follow you, how to get them excited. And so, but the thing is, because great ideas aren't enough, so often when I'm working with ascenders, I hear yeah, but my idea was really good. I made that mistake. When I went into that product meeting where we were prioritizing the roadmap, I felt really comfortable going to that meeting because I was like, yeah, this idea is obviously the best idea. But the thing is, great ideas aren't enough. You have to break it down for people why they should follow it. Think about it this way. The companies you work at have great products. Yet your company has a marketing and sales department because they have to break down the benefits of the product. The product doesn't sell itself. Let's take Apple, for example. Apple, you're probably using one or more of Apple's products right now. Apple has amazing products. If Apple has to market their products, then so do you. Because this is not if I have a great idea, people will follow. This is not if I build it, they will come. This is not Field of Dreams. It's noisy out there. There's competing priorities. You have things you want to prioritize. Your engineering team, your design team, sales, your own manager, they all have different priorities and different initiatives that they want to prioritize. So it's on you to break down why your idea is the best one. And yes, you have the data, but that's not sufficient. You have to walk people through that. And I can share that from firsthand experience. It was not until I learned how to influence that I was able to really thrive with my team. So this is my team and I celebrating a successful product launch about 4 months after that big blow up I told you about. I promise you, we would not have been all smiles and even hanging out outside of work if I had not learned how to influence, if I had not learned how to get them invested in my ideas. When I did not know this, it hurt my reputation. There was a lot of strain in the team. I was not the leader I wanted to be or should have been. We weren't hitting our goals, and that all changed once I learned how to influence and once I learned how to get people bought in. Another example, this is Althea. Althea is a product manager, and she joined Ascend's leadership program because she was struggling to work with some dominant personalities on her team, including the CTO, which we all know when you're in product, that is such a huge stakeholder for you. They were cutting her out of meetings. They weren't really paying attention to what she was saying. They weren't taking her ideas seriously. Super frustrating, stressful. It was hurting her career growth. So she used the program tools that she learned in Ascend to position her idea in a way that made the CTO excited about it, that convinced him that this was actually a good idea for his team, for him. The way she shifted her communication after Ascend led to a breakthrough in their relationship. It transformed how they worked. Now he comes to her proactively seeking her input. That's the dream, right? These key stakeholders come to you and they want you in the meetings. That's what's happening with her, all because she learned how to influence. Before I dive into specific strategies that you can use, I want to first talk about why we failed to get buy-in. Because when we fail to get buy-in, it's stressful, it's frustrating, it hurts our reputation, and we don't get the career growth that we want. And we fail to get buy-in for 3 big reasons. 1, we think it's obvious what the right answer is. We forget that everyone else has a different perspective as us. 2, we don't think we have enough time. We're in a project deadline. There's too many moving pieces. We're like, I don't have time to go talk to that cross-functional partner. I don't have time to go get this final sign-off from engineering. I'm just going to push this through. Or 3, we're fear of dissent. We're afraid someone will push back on us. So we're like, let's just jam this right through before someone can push back. The thing is, and I'm sure most of you realize this in a very painful manner, that only might lead to short-term success. It creates a lot of problems in the future. So now let's talk about how you can influence. These are the 6 ingredients to influence: credibility, storytelling, presence, co-creation, active listening, and building allies. Today, we're going to talk about storytelling. In the Ascend's Leadership Program for Women, we dive deep into all of these, including storytelling, so you really have a full picture of like what it looks to influence at work. So let's dive into storytelling. Storytelling is really popular because it is one of the key most skills that you need to be able to influence well. All the great leaders are good storytellers. They know how to get you excited about their ideas. They know how to have you follow along with their vision, even in challenging times. Stories create sticky memories for us. And you need to master this in order to be a successful PM, in order to be a successful leader. Now, storytelling, there's a lot of components, and we spend more than a week in the program, but here I want to cover one specific, is how do you create a narrative that resonates with your audience? And this narrative applies whether you are talking about a comment in a meeting or a presentation or a hallway conversation. How do you structure your message so when you're sharing it with someone, you get a yes? They are interested in it. They're excited by it. And you can apply this in any situation, whether you're trying to get a yes on your recommendation, whether you are in a stand-up and you're just sharing what you're working on and you want everyone to understand that you are spending your time in a really valuable way, to get your team aligned on what the OKRs or the goals should be for the quarter, to align with your manager or cross-functional partners on how a project is going. In each of these moments, you need to be able to storytell, creating a narrative that makes it easy for people to follow along. So there's 3 questions to get to that yes. And I want to go through each of these. And as I was saying, like, keep in mind, like, a situation you have work where you're struggling to get that buy-in. So the first question is, who is my audience? You know, this seems simple, but I am shocked. And actually, I've been guilty of this myself, so I guess I shouldn't be shocked. But how often we forget this. I made that mistake when I was telling you about that blow up I had with my team. I was so focused on realizing why I thought this idea was really obviously good, the product feature I was going to prioritize. I didn't think about, what are other people thinking about? So for example, your audience could be your engineering manager, engineers on your team, the designer, your manager, the CPO, the CTO, the CEO, sales, marketing, customers. So think about, like, when you go into that meeting, in that conversation, who are you trying to get that yes from? Who is that audience? So I want to just take some time and think about, like, who is one stakeholder you need to get buy-in from, and drop that in the chat. So drop in the chat, like, who is one stakeholder that you need to get buy-in from? Maybe it's someone on your mind right now and you're like, oh, I just got to this meeting with them and they're like hard to get attention. Maybe it's someone like, I won't be successful unless I get the engineering manager on board with me. So drop that in the chat. Who is one stakeholder that you need to get buy-in from? If you don't do this, then your project is not going to be successful, or this idea that you want to push forward is not going to be successful, or you're not going to be successful in your role.
So it looks like,
sorry, go ahead, Polly.
I was just going to read off some of the ones: director, CPO, CEO, sales, managing partner, engineering manager, lead engineer, lead developers, same. Other product managers, COO.
Yes, exactly. These are all really good. And I even see, like, a lot of commonalities around these, right? Like engineers, CEOs, cross-functional partners. And I hope that, like, you can see, like, you're all facing similar problems. And so we can use today's session to get people aligned on it. And, really, like, so once you know who your audience is, then let's think about, what do they care about? So for example, it might be around hitting the revenue target. It might be to reduce costs. It might be to hit the OKRs. Maybe they care about improving team culture, creating more diversity in the team, improving the customer experience, reducing tech debt. So for example, there's your lead engineering manager is probably gonna have different priorities than the other PMs. Or sales might be thinking about some things differently than the designer on your team. And so it's really important to think about, like, what does that person actually care about? And then moving forward from there. And then the third question is, what are their concerns? When you go in and share your idea, why are they going to be hesitant? Why are they going to push back on you? What are they going to be worried about? Maybe it's because you're going to reprioritize your roadmap. Maybe they think you're going to add more complexity into the product. You're actually increasing tech debt. You are putting your idea puts the project at risk for delays. We won't hit our OKRs. You're adding more work to my plate. Maybe this initiative, this idea you're pitching, will actually risk them getting promoted. Just take a second right now, a few seconds, just to think about, like, that. The stakeholder that you just wrote in the chat, what are their concerns going to be? If they're in sales, maybe it's like, wait, are you hurting how I'm going to hit my quota? Are we changing customer segmentation? If we're changing the product experience, does that change who I'm going to target to close deals? Peer PMs, are you taking away resources from me? If you are pitching this new initiative, like, am I going to lose an engineer? Are they going to get assigned to you? How's this going to impact, if you're pitching a new feature, how is that going to impact the part of the product I own? If you're talking about a new process, are you adding more work to me? I already feel really busy. Yeah, so put more work in. And the key is like, I mean, how you're talking about is like exactly like, but long term is better for everyone. And that's why if you are able to proactively think about what people's concerns are, when you go into that meeting, when you share that document, a pre-read, or however you're communicating your ideas, you can proactively address their concerns. Director, how does this impact partner deliverables and commitments? Yes, like how does this impact the next steps? How is this going to impact the customers? And that's why I bring up these 3 questions, because you need to think about these before you move forward. When you think about them in advance, and we've now worked with like hundreds of women in Sense Leadership Program, and this is like the #1 game changer. That when you can think about your audience, when you can think about like, okay, who is my stakeholder? What do they care about? What are their concerns? You think about that before you go into that meeting, you can proactively address their concerns. So now let me show you this in real life action. So this is Kendall. She's a marketing manager at Box. And week 4 of a Sense Leadership Program, she got dropped into a last-minute meeting that her manager could not attend. The meeting was extremely important. They were meeting with some senior stakeholders to get sign-off on additional resources for her team. Now, we've all been there where we got dropped into last-minute meetings. It's stressful. And so what did she do? Well, and she only had an hour and a half to prepare. On top of that, one of the people in the meeting that she had to get sign-off from was someone who she found really intimidating. That person seemed to ignore her in meetings and not really listen to what she said. So what did she do? Well, she used the program tools from Ascend, including the message prep worksheet, which people use even a year after the program, to help her align on prep for this meeting. And she answered some of the questions that you're thinking about right now. Okay, who's my audience? What are their concerns? What are they going to care about? So that way in the meeting, she was able to proactively address their concerns, which built trust. She got yes from everyone, including that difficult stakeholder. She came out of the meeting feeling much more confident and empowered and successful, more than she ever had been. And I share that with you because when you build habits around this, it is a confidence booster and it helps you show up better at work. So now, as you go into these blenders, I want you to reflect on these 3 questions. For the project that you have in mind or the stakeholder that you think about which of these 3 questions you find the most challenging. Maybe you're having a hard time, like, yeah, I don't actually know which stakeholder to focus on. I have this big product review coming on, but there's multiple stakeholders. So I'm not sure which audience person I should tailor it to. Maybe you're like, how do I know what they care about? I don't really know what their concerns are. I don't know them that well. We don't have trust. Or maybe you're like, I know what their concerns are, but I don't know how to solve this. I don't know how it impacts my partner's deliverables or commitments. I don't know how it's going to impact the customers. And then the second question is, how will you resolve this challenge? What information can you gather? What actions can you take to resolve this? So spend 5 minutes first. Partner A will go share these set of questions and their answers around it, and then partner B can go. We want this to be really valuable for you. So like you can also make this be like a discussion between the 2 of you. One of you stuck in a problem, the other person can help you problem solve around it. You're going through similar experiences, and the more. So I was saying that we can have people come up if they want to come share, if we have someone come up to share their experience. And then also while we're doing that, like feel free to drop any questions that you have in the chat and we can dive into all of those. And, I'm curious, like while we're doing that, like what is something that you struggle with to influence that stakeholder that you have? Maybe it's your CEO, maybe it's the engineering manager, maybe it's your PM. Like drop that in the chat. Like, what do you struggle with around this or around the stakeholder?
Mm-hmm.
And while we're doing that, like, what about you?
Yeah, I was just going to mention.
You're in the world right now. Tell us.
One of the chats that I had in my Blender session, we had a conversation about how, sometimes when you have design and developers, each have their difference in opinions about how to, implement a particular product, so challenges that you have to work through when design wants maybe version A and developers want version B, like how do you sort of bring those 2 together? So what are some of your feedback and tips that you would use with those 2 particular groups, trying to get them on the same page?
Yeah, I love that question. I think that's a struggle that I've run into so many times. And it's so common because everyone thinks theirs is like the best or they're trying to solve for this. So I think one is aligning on what is that core problem you're trying to solve? What's that customer problem? What's that goal that you're working towards? Because once you align on that, then you can work together to figure out that, then you have this like measurement that you're all working towards. And so you have the same shared, like how you're measuring. And then, so once you have that, then I'd say like, it's just like really taking the time to like understand people's perspective. And, you know, right now, as I'm saying that, you're probably like, yeah, of course. But I think so often we're listening in our mind, we're like, this person's so frustrating, or like, oh, they're like, you know, they're not, they're ignoring this piece. And so, but like really active listening. Cause I mean, so often I remember I'd be sitting in meetings and I'd be so focused on what I was going to say, or so focused on getting people to like hear my idea that I wasn't actually truly listening to what the designer was saying. And people pick up on it. And also you're not like, you're missing out on cues that they're giving you. So I'd say like really just understand like what's happening, and then set the tone when you come into that conversation. Be like, you know, I know we're all working towards the same goal. I know we want the same thing. And it's just like figuring out like, let's understand each other's perspectives so we can create the best outcome overall. So especially as a PM, I think that's your job, like bring people together. And then I would say is make sure everyone has a rationale. So like, it's like, oh, I just feel like this is right. Like, no, like go get customer data, go get quantitative data, go get customer data is super important. And like, you should be doing this every time you go influence. Like you should always have this as a best practice, and then push other people to do the same thing. And so I think like, it's really that, you know, like having that shared goal, understanding people's perspectives, having that customer data, and then figuring out like, what are the trade-offs between these designs? Like, is there a compromise solution that still hits the goal? And if you're really, usually at that point, I think if people feel heard, I think the times when I've had the most conflict or like kind of the most tension on my product teams is like when someone felt not heard. And so when someone felt like their scope creeps, others were doing the job for them. Like as a PM, I was building up the technical solution when they're like, that's our job. And so I think it's really making sure like people are feeling respected and valued. And that really opens up the conversation, and just figuring out like, okay, like, and even acknowledging like we're at a standstill, like where do we want to go from here? But like coming in from that place of curiosity and a loss of patience, it might take you a lot longer than you actually expect, has been a really nice way to drive that alignment. What's worked for you in that kind of situation?
So a couple of things. So lucky for us, my particular product I work on, we continuously release, and so what I try and talk to the team about is sort of understanding their concerns, documenting it so everyone knows that I hear them, I understand them, and then the promise of like, okay, well, this is not the final version that we're going to release. This is just the first version. It's the MVP. So just trying to get everyone's buy-in. Okay, well, what's that first iteration that we could ship and learn from, and then we can make iterations and develop and continuously improve these particular sort of functions or features that we're releasing. So I think having that understanding of like, this is not the end state also helps relieve some stress, because obviously no designer, no developer wants to put out a product that they're not comfortable signing their name to. So I think sharing that, this is an iterative, collaborative experience where we're going to continuously improve the product is something that helps sort of buy everyone into, at least the first iteration, and then we'll just improve it from there.
Yeah, I love that. And that actually reminds me of a situation I had at work where, in my last role, we were responsible for revamping the core product. And so it had a lot of visibility. I was presenting to the board on it. It was in our company OKR. So like lots of good opportunities, but also lots of pressure. And so as we were mapping out the product, there was conflicting opinions, exactly how you were describing. And one thing that helped us is when we were at standstill, when we did like all these things I just talked about, it was like, okay, like which parts of this proposal can we go test? So we don't need to go build out the whole thing. Like, what is that like really MVP, but like the smallest piece of it, even one, like what's the biggest risk or what's our biggest question? Let's go test that. Maybe that means like conducting more customer research. Maybe that means like doing something else, or just like changing one part of the product that takes like very low effort, but can give us good data, and then moving forward. So like really just always going back to like, how can we let the data speak? Mm-hmm. And then, and using that. And what you're saying, like, I like really helped in that situation also, because everybody was so nervous, like how you're saying, like, people are scared to put product out, if it's going to be the final solution. And this situation too, is like, not only did they want to have a good customer experience, but they knew there's so many eyes on our product. And so being able to like break it down and be like, let's just go test it and let the data speak was really helpful. So I think that framing, like even what you're talking about, is really important to shift people's mindset, even if it's more just to get people comfortable rather than actually like needing data to make that granular decision.
Great. Let's see, is there anyone else that has any sort of questions for Shivani or anything that they talked about in their little Blender sessions that they'd like to raise? You can feel free to type it into the chat, or if you feel comfortable, you can sort of raise your hand and we can invite you onto the stage as well. Okay. I think people might still be in their Blender sessions. They might be a little bit too excited to sort of stay and chat there. But maybe sort of as we're chatting through, is there any other sort of like tips that you would give, Shivani? Like sometimes when we're thinking about winning over some of our stakeholders, it's not so much the stakeholders that are, you know, just either neutral or positive towards your particular product, but sometimes, you know, the stakeholders that are most important to win over are those ones that are maybe they're not as strong believers of your product or your feature or whatever part of the business you're working on. So do you have any recommendations on how you sort of win those stakeholders over?
Yeah, that's a great one. Those are definitely really stressful situations. And there, I first think about the 3 questions that we just talked about, like who's your audience, what do they care about, what are their concerns? Like, especially with them, like first impressions matter. Like you have to just nail it when you go into that conversation. So prepping in advance and reflecting on those questions and thinking about, and what are their concerns or what do they care about? Like can be the rationale, but it can also be how you present it. So like, you know, some people love presentations, other people love documents, like all these things have to tie, like all these little things play into like how you're going to convince them. And the second thing I'd say is like really focus on like, how can I win their respect? If you don't have respect, like nothing else matters. So like really making sure you're the storytelling piece that we're just talking about, like building up other influencing skills, leveraging allies to vouch for you. I'm actually going to do, I'll drop this in the chat. Ariana, we were talking about this earlier. I'm like, and what we were talking about right before, I'm leading a workshop on how to work with dominant personalities in 2 weeks. It's free. I'll drop it in the chat if anyone's interested in joining, because we'll just dive deeper into like, how do you work with these difficult stakeholders? And so, but I would start with like these 3 questions, and then gaining the respect. I think leveraging allies is a big part of it. So figure out who do they respect, who did they seek out opinions from, and get those people on board first before you go to them. I see a question in the chat from Amanda. Do you have patience for this kind of consensus gathering when you have a lot of pressure to move fast and ship quickly? That's a really great one. You know, and when I was sharing like why we fail to get buy-in, often like we feel like we don't have enough time and we have to like jam things through. And I think what I found, I think what many of you have experienced too, like when we actually fail to get that time, when we don't do that, it actually leads to problems in the long run. So what I would say to that question is like, you just have to have that patience. And the thing is like, if you cultivate those relationships beforehand, like focus on being relationship driven, not transactional. So cultivate those relationships beforehand. So before you even get to that deadline, you already have a solid relationship with your engineers, with your designers, with your manager, with user research, or whoever else you need to get signed off from. So when you go to them and pitch them an idea, they've already been in the loop. They have trust with you. They know that you have the goodest, best intentions. And then they're able to help you make decisions quickly. And so I think like, you know, I get a couple of times it happens when you're like, sorry, I'm in a jam. Like, can you just sign off on this, or I don't have time? But like, if you find yourself saying that multiple times, like I would really take a step back and question, like, are you actually being able to influence correctly? Are you actually being strategic about this? Or are you just focused on like delivering your projects? And not only will your products not be successful, but also you're not going to get a reputation for someone who is collaborative, who is able to rally different stakeholders, because that is like a core part of being a good product leader.
Great, that's really insightful. We are approaching the end of the event, and I want to maybe touch upon one of the things that you mentioned. So, you know, when you're understanding your stakeholders and their sort of concerns, you know, now that we're working, or a lot of us are working in this remote world, so you don't have the opportunity to actually go for a real coffee or a water cooler chat with these folks. What are sort of some of your advice that you would have in terms of building the relationship with these key stakeholders to understand, their concerns about your business, your product, and sort of get to know them sort of more on a personal level so that you have this established relationship to build that trust and influence.
Yeah. So one, I think we've been working in this remote environment for over a year now. So like, hopefully, we've all kind of gotten used to building relationships over remote. I know it's hard. It's so much easier being in person. One thing I'd say, like, one trick I use is I schedule time a couple weeks out when people's calendars are pretty empty. So when you ask someone for a coffee chat, they're more likely to say yes, because they're like, yeah, okay, my calendar's empty. And then when they get to it, they're not going to turn you down usually. And so then you just have that conversation. I think even, I get asked this question a lot that you're asking, which is a really great question. Like, how do I build these relationships in remote and work? And so even you making that gesture of being like, hey, cross-functional partner, hey, engineering manager, like, we haven't caught up in a while, let's grab coffee, sends a really nice signal to them that you care, that you're carving out the time. So while you might feel self-conscious for doing it, people are usually really grateful for it because they're also craving that connection and they're also trying to figure out how to build relationships. Things that, and then, so that's like how I think about like scheduling stuff. I think some activities that have been really good is just like, yeah, you both bring your favorite drink. You go for a walk and you kind of like have your phone with you. So I was interviewing Yardley Cole, who's one of the founding members of Women in Product. I was interviewing her for a fireside chat, and one of the tips I really love that she does is like she will ping some people, I think like on a Friday afternoon or like on a Wednesday, and just like in the moment to see if someone's free to grab coffee. And that spontaneity is like, builds like just more bonding, and it's just like a nice way for her to keep in touch with people. So like do something like that, like block out for you, like, I'm going to block out like a couple hours this week to do these like coffee chats. You ping people. If they're not free, then like they're not free. It's not a big deal, but at least you've tried. And so I think those are a couple ways you can get creative. And then the other way I say build rapport is like, if you see something that interests that person, like, hey, I know in our last all hands or in our last update meeting, you said like you're facing this problem, or like last time you mentioned like you're going on this place for like your weekend trip, like here's something that I think you might find interesting. That goes a long way without you really taking up people's time. So like just getting creative there around it can be really helpful.
Great, awesome tips. Thank you so much, Shivani, for this particular session. It's been super insightful and wonderful. On behalf of the Women in Product team, we'd like to thank everyone as well for joining us in today's session and participating. We'd really love to get your feedback. So if you want, you can share your thoughts on the feedback tab here in the session or in the Hop in More area in the Women in Product booth. We'll also have Blender open for another half hour. So if you want to connect with more women in the community, feel free to click over to the Blender and connect with some more folks. So just as a reminder, one of the fun things about these sessions is a networking portion. So join back and meet some cool folks. And this is not the only Blender event. We will have more in the future. So we hope to see you at one of the future Blender events as well, where you'll also learn some cool, insightful things that you can use in your daily product practice. Thanks again, everyone, for joining today, and we'll hope to see you soon.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks so much for Polly for today and Ariana for organizing and Women in Product. This was really fun. Reach out to us, and I hope you had really meaningful conversations as you're thinking about how to drive better alignment with your teams. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining. Take care.